Welcome to the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. Brought to you by Blue Sky Business Consulting. We discuss 5 questions in about 15 minutes. Hello again, everyone. Welcome to the Team Engagement Podcast. We're excited that you're here joining us, and I'm very excited to welcome our guest today. This is Kevin Hubschmann, and he is from New York, both the city and the state here in the United States. So, Kevin, thank you so much for joining me. By the way, just for our audience, he is the founder of LaughDot, and we are going to have a great discussion today. So, Kevin, before we get into the questions, tell us a little bit more about LaughDot and what you're working on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. LaughDot brings comedy experiences to corporate audiences. I myself was in the corporate world for about 6+ years, and during that time was able to really experience all the different corporate cultures, training, growth, entertainment. I was in an events company, so I was able to also see how corporate events played out. So, with that experience, I was able to see where comedy experiences fit in the corporate world. So, now we run this business that brings comedians to offices or celebrations. It also brings training facilitators to teach people comedy skills that they can then use in their professional world. So multifaceted there.
Oh, I really like that. It's such a great angle. And we were talking about this before we started the recording, but I just love the perspective that you bring to the corporate environment. And we're going to kind of touch on that just a little bit more as we're going through the questions, which we might as well just jump into it then. So, Kevin, our first question: how can leaders create a psychologically safe environment?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with listening. I think that's one of the core tenets of improv, which is one of our training methodologies, is how are you able to actively listen? And if you're able to actively listen, then you have the ability to empathetically communicate. But if you blow past the listening and you blow past, really validating what people have to say, you're going to shut people off immediately. So I think the number one thing that leaders can do is frankly, pipe down for a minute and listen and just kind of hear what the problems are versus coming in with, a performance review that is really talking at people or something like that. So I really believe in the power of listening and how it can create trust and then ultimately get people to, row in the same direction as you.
Oh, I really like that. And so well said. I love how you said that you really have to just kind of pipe down a little bit and just be willing to listen and come with a sense of empathy. I love that. Great approach. All right. Question number 2. Now, Kevin, I'm sure you've had a lot of people that have had positive influences on your life or in your life. Think of one person that has had that kind of an impact. And then what's one word that you would use to describe that person?
I'll say that probably the biggest impact from a corporate perspective is my old CEO, Ben Hinman. He was someone that really opened my eye to the fact that work can be a very fun place. And every time I would explain to my friends, they wouldn't believe that where I worked was a real place, because he was always, creating these amazing experiences for us. And he just really did things differently than any other CEO in the country. And so that was so impactful for me because it allowed me to really say, like, oh, the corporate world does not have to be this shirt and tie place or, this place where you can't have a drink in the office or, have parties in your office or, even get the keys to throw your own party after work, which is what he let me do. So, I think that was impactful. If I have to give one word, I'd just say unique, one of one. And I think that is something that I've wanted to take with me in, being an extension of him when I go to companies and say, you don't have to do a boring training, you don't have to do a boring team event. There's opportunities for this to be really fun and have laughter be the glue that holds everyone together.
Oh, I like that. Great approach. And I love that word unique. I like that. I think that's a great way to describe any of us, really. We can all be unique, but you've been able to identify that that's what you really appreciated about him. So thank you for recognizing him and thank you for giving us the one word unique. That's awesome. All right. Question number 3. Uh, Kevin, share with us a little bit about your feelings on how leaders can foster a growth mindset, either in themselves as the leader or with their team.
I touched on it before with the active listening, and then I mentioned empathetic communication, but nothing says growth more than the words yes and. And that is a really important terminology that we use in our training is allowing people to grow and build on top of each other. When you say something to me, I'm not, and I'm even, you like, I might have expertise more than you have, and my word might mean a little bit more than yours, but it doesn't mean that I shouldn't kind of build this snowball with you. New York just got a lot of snow, so that's where my brain is at. But it's like, how can we really roll that ball together? And yes, and is a great way of doing it. You don't want to slow people down with words like no, but, or things that fragment growth. And I think that that is a really small change people can make, is changing their communication styles so that yes and is at the forefront, and you've eliminated words like no, but, and or. And so those are incredibly important for a growth mindset, because the growth mindset starts by everyone thinking that they have a say and knowing that they're being heard. So that's how I always like to think of that growth mindset, right after that active listening, then you can get into empathetic communication, and then really the sky is the limit.
I really like that. That's a great phrase, yes and. And I also loved how you talked about kind of this snowball effect of building on each other, and there's a sense of collaboration and building together in a team environment, and as the leader of a team, that is so critical. And so I love that approach. Love that. All right, question number 4. What ideas do you have, Kevin, on how leaders can manage emotional well-being?
I hate to be a broken record, but listen, it's so funny. It's like a lot of these answers, they're not complex, because people try to make them out to be and try to find a new methodology for a lot of things. But just kind of think back to like any sort of relationship that you have with anybody, and that if you are heard and you feel and you're able to speak, someone's able to validate what you're saying, then the sky is the limit for that relationship. And so again, I think that that is the skill set that just needs to be dialed in, because it's relatable for managing people, it's related for salespeople, it's related for cross-department collaboration, it's related to anything. Listening is the key. And if anybody's to take anything away from this, is that if you are able to listen and then allow people to know that you're listening through the words you use after they stop speaking, then you have an unlimited potential for your relationship.
Oh, I like that. Such great advice there. And yeah, we can. It's. I don't know that it is a broken record, because listening applies to a lot of these things that we're talking about. So I appreciate that. All right, our final question, Kevin. Tell us a little bit about a baseball story that you got, or a memory I think you were going to share. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm not a baseball player. I was a lacrosse player my whole life, so baseball was not in the family. But I recently, last or 2 birthdays ago, went to the Mets game over in City Field, and got a bunch of tickets for a bunch of friends, and then they went into extras, and then they had a grand slam. I think it was a grand slam walk off, and it was just absurd. It was electric. The Big Apple came out, as it does at the Mets at Mets Stadium, City Field, and it was just awesome. Nothing better than I do think one of the most fun game experiences to have is just going to a baseball game and zoning out and talking with people, having some fun, having some beers and some dogs, and no nuts for me. I'm allergic, but we are. I love having fun there and just enjoying the atmosphere.
Oh, that's such a great story. It reminds me very, very quickly, and I don't want to try and do a one up or anything like that, but one of my great baseball memories of my own is when I'm out here in Utah. We don't have a team yet. We're going to get there. But I came out to, this is probably 30 years ago at least. And I came out to New York to visit my sister who was living there at the time. And we went to a Mets game, and it went into extras. It was the San Diego Padres, and it was back before where they had these little bit faster ways to handle extra innings. And it went to like the 15th, 16th inning.
Oh my gosh.
It was
Double baseball there.
Oh man, yeah, and it was intense because both teams kept getting guys on third and couldn't get them to score. So it was intense. It was a lot of fun. Well, thank you so much for sharing that story, and thank you, Kevin, so much for coming onto the podcast today and talking about how we can add a little bit of laughter into things and ease up a little bit, but also some really important topics around emotional well-being and psychological safety and so forth. So thank you for being with us. Tell the audience, how can they find you?
Yeah, Laugh.events is our website. We also have a newsletter, laughrx.laugh.events, that you can join, learn a little bit more there. And then my LinkedIn's always the best place to check out. Give me a follow or a connection. And that's just Kevin Hubschmann on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Kevin. And thanks to all of you who are joining us every week. We remind you to subscribe, be a part of the family here, and join us every week for another episode of the Team Engagement Podcast. Thanks so much. Have a great day. This is Shawn Richards with the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. Be sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. And for more leadership tips, pick up your copy of Rapid Fire Leadership by going to rapidfireleadership.com, where you can also download free resources to help you in your leadership role. Thanks for joining us today. Have a great day.